Asana practice of Ashtanga, because it is a super important aspect of the practice and definitely worthy of some exploration. So I've structured this Asana clinic a little different in that there are several teachers that I've encountered over the years in their writings and so forth that say various things about the breath that I find either illuminating or interesting or sometimes even funny. So I wanted to just kind of use that as a framework and kind of walk through some of what these folks have said about the breath and then kind of work on how we might actually use that. So just to start off, Richard Freeman, who is one of the most senior Ashtanga teachers in the world, and very, well respected, and also very illustrative, very passionate when he talks about aspects like the breath practice. So he often, there's a lot that he has said about this, but it's pretty cool. But one thing that he said that I wanted to just highlight right up front in his book, The Mirror of Yoga, which if you haven't read The Mirror of Yoga, it's a very good book to read. I would say if you're newer to the practice and you're asking me for recommendations on books to read, that would be one of the ones. That'd be great. He said, well known for spectacular physical poses. So he's referring to Ashtanga and the postures that we do. Hatha yoga, Ashtanga is a form of Hatha yoga, is actually a system of working the body and breath in order to investigate meditatively deep and subtle feelings, responses, and reflexes in relation to the conditioning of the mind. So one of the reasons that I wanted to share this up front is because he draws these connections between body, breath, and mind. And that's really where it's at, So like when you go to sit meditation, a lot of times the teacher is going to give some kind of guidance that involves observing, connecting with your breath. And so what this emphasizes is that when we're doing the asana practice in Ashtanga yoga, it falls right in that vein, in that meditative practice. Okay? Get up to change the slide. Okay, so then a lot of you are familiar. Another book that folks have used, and there's a copy of it right there. He is by David Swenson. David Swenson is really well known for having written this book that a lot of folks have used over the years to teach themselves how to do the practice, because not everybody has access to a shala or a teacher, so we're very fortunate in that regard. But he says about the breathing practice in asana that he calls it ujjayi, which is a bit of it's interesting because the use of the term ujjayi, when someone uses that, they probably are a little bit old school. This is how I was taught the breath, pretty much exactly the way that it's described here. So what he says is that ujjayi is a specialized breathing technique, which means victorious. The word ujjayi is related to the word upliti. It says ut is up, to lift up, move up. So it's in this case interpreted to mean victorious. It is a unique form of breathing that is performed by creating a soft sound in the back of the throat while inhaling and exhaling through the nose. So there's really important pieces of information right here in this sentence. First off, that we're breathing through the nose. So the way to go about that is to gently seal your lips. So as soon as you step onto the mat in Samasthiti, just gently sealing the lips and focusing the flow of the breath through your nose, and it really doesn't change from that point forward until you get into practice and you get to Shavasana. And the back of the throat, a soft sound in the back of the throat. So one of the ways to kind of help yourself know if you're using the breath correctly is if you can get that sensation of feeling the breath flow through. It is helpful to gently smile. So this is an interesting thing that David Smithson said. To gently smile while breathing to allow the air to swirl around the back of the throat before continuing its journey to the lungs. One of the things that's kind of cool about this too is that it's not uncommon at all for Buddhist meditation teachers to say, gently smile like the Buddha, you know? The upturn of the corners of our mouth is it has an incredible psychological, physiological impact on us that we don't often realize. So that is just, you know, a positive thing to do and a way to further explore this. Then he says, the swirling action of the breath flowing through is what creates the unique sound, which has been described as wind in the trees, a distant ocean, cobra snake, or for the less specific, Darth Vader from Star Wars. Now, one of the things that we also use is how you use the tongue. It's called Kachari Mudra. Ka, the element of space. Chari or acharya is a maker of something, maker of shoes, for example. Kachari you could interpret as making space. And when we apply that, we take the tip of the tongue, curl it up to touch the roof of the mouth gently, somewhere touching above the top teeth, and it can be pretty far back, just wherever works for you. That also helps to channelize and control the flow of the breath, bring more sensation into it, and help with the controlling or the constricting with the flow. The other thing that's happening is that the glottis, the vocal cords, are slightly constricted. So these things are used to stretch your breath. Because the idea is that when you're moving through transitions, for example, when you're moving and breathing at the same time in the practice, that the movement, the breath starts just slightly ahead of the movement and finishes just slightly after, so that a lot of times what's actually happening is that the movement is outstretching the breath. So one of the things that you want to start to work and cultivate in your practice is the opposite, like get the breath stretch so that the movement happens within it. Then when you're in the state of the asana, when you're there and you're breathing 5 times, then you can really focus on the even, steady flow of breath in that sort of so-called static position. It's not static. Even when you're holding an asana, still movement happening. We're never actually static. Always movement happening. We are, impermanent, constant change. And that requires movement. Okay, any questions about that so far? Yeah?
The thing about the tongue placement, that just I don't know if you can elaborate on it. It makes me, when I try it, it just feels really uncomfortable.
Well, if it's feeling really uncomfortable for you for some reason, then it may not be, it just may not function for you, at least not right now.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, it doesn't have to be very far back. So I would imagine that if you just place the tip of the tongue right at the top of the teeth, it's not going to cause discomfort, because that's not very far out.
Like the top of the
basic. In the Hot Yoga Pradipika, which is this text that describes the practices of Hot Yoga, it's medieval, written in medieval times. It's drawing from practices that precede that, by thousands of years. The Kachari was actually you cut the frenulum, which is that's tissue that keeps your tongue in the face of your mouth, and allow the tongue to be taken all the way back to plug the hole and really control the space to allow.
So plug my hole, the throat?
Yeah.
It sounds really ridiculous.
I know. That's crazy.
Oh, so you
We're not
just-
going to spend much time on that because it's just obviously no one does that anymore, or maybe not no one, but it's not common. But so we're doing a much gentler, kinder version of Vichar Yoga.
But that does illustrate the why. I get that more. That makes more sense.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
so they're taking it very seriously. The Darth Vader from Star Wars part is a little over the top. Okay, now this is also a little bit of a separation between old school and new school-ish. Like when I first was introduced to the practice, I mean, you were supposed to be like breathing strongly, like and fill the room, and that was very much encouraged. These days, the thinking is that can kind of just amp up energy too much, and so if you in Sharat's world, the more contemporary world of Ashtanga yoga, he does not call it Ujjayi, because Ujjayi is a pranayama, and what we're doing with the breath in the asana practice is technically not pranayama, because we're not holding breath. Pranayama becomes pranayama when you add kumbhaka. Kumbhakas are the retention, or the holding of the breath in, or the holding of the breath out. We're not doing it in the asana practice. So that's one reason. But also, just as a distancing from that old idea, he just usually says breath sound. And he means gentle, a lighter sound. Okay? But I still like the Greek part. All right. Subtle. So this is a subtle aspect of the practice. This idea of breath with sound. Can call it Ujjayi. That's fine. Ujjayi means victorious. It's a stretching of the breath. In an inhalation, exhalation through the nose. I just want to stress these 3 points. So that's one. Second is it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So what we're trying to do is bring consistency and evenness so that the inhales and the exhales match, not only in duration, but also in intensity. The other thing about that is that the beginning, the middle, and the end of the inhale and the exhale should be the same. And a lot of times what happens is, especially when we're first learning posture, is the front end of the inhale or the front end of the exhale is where all the emphasis is. So one of the things that I'm monitoring, listening for, watching, observing when you're doing your practice is the ability to find that evenness of breath. That's like one indication that you have proficiency in that posture. You have steadiness, you have some ease, and you're, like really ready for moving on. The third aspect of it is that this is we're talking now more esoteric, energetic. It's a purification. These long, even breaths strengthen the internal fire. Some of you have probably heard me refer to this, like the fire in the belly. That helps to purify and cleanse your nervous system inside out. And this has to do too, like what I mentioned at the beginning of practice today, is like allowing the history that is within yourself, within your body, to be processed, or the karma, the feelings, the intuitions, traumas, to burble up and be processed. Okay. Right. Then, Trusty, how you doing? Any questions? Okay. If you do have, just feel free to unmute yourself. Shout it out. All right. So then, going back to David Swenson, he goes on to say that to assist those of you who are new to this type of reading, I have a method called the Ha method. So this is how you could use it in a workshop or something to try to teach how to breathe. He says, sit up straight, take a full inhale through the nose, then let it out through the mouth with the soft sound of Ha. So you're Ha, like you're dragging out the H part and the A, as though you are whispering. So let's try that. So Just take a seat, sit up tall. Close your eyes if you'd like. I can sometimes help to focus the mind. You're going to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. So take a full inhale through your nose. And then opening up the mouth, let the breath out, but make this sound of ha. Inhale. Ha. Again, inhale. Ha. Do you feel the air swirling in the back of your throat? Okay, keep going. But midway through your exhale, you're going to close your mouth. So do it again, inhaling through the nose. We'll do one with the mouth open. Exhale out, ha. And then inhale through your nose. Start to exhale through your mouth, making the ha sound, but then close the lips. And let it keep going. Letting it exit through the nose. Okay, try that a couple more times on your own. You're inhaling through your nose, partially exhaling through the mouth with the ha sound, and then closing the mouth, like you're containing that energy. Keep it feel. So this helps, and if you do it really strongly, you may feel so much of a flutter that it kind of feels tickly, right? It makes you like feel something that's a little bit overkill, but it helps to demonstrate the point. You can release that. Now he then goes on to say, the second step is to gently smile while inhaling and create the same swirly sound as your exhale. With practice, it will become more familiar, and soon you'll be able to utilize this ujjayi sound without any effort at all. So that is like the practice in and of itself. You know, it's not like without any effort at all, but I guess it is similar to, for instance, learning a series, like committing that to memory. Once it's there, you don't have to think about it. And same with the breath. Once you get this breath working for you, you don't have to think about it anymore, which is good because we're meditating. And so the less things we have to think about, the better our meditation. All right. Then something else I wanted to share that I find really cool. And if you haven't read this book, it's awesome. Really great book. The book is called Breath, and it's by a guy named James Nestor. And he goes on this sort of like multi-year quest to like dive into and understand breath and like his health and how it's related. And he finds all sorts of interesting, really amazing things about the breath. One of the key things he finds is that it is super important to breathe through your nose. And through, like, as society has progressed, we breathe more and more through our mouths, and it does terrible things for us, including like really inhibiting our quality of sleep and even changing the shape of our faces. So breathing through your nose. So the fact that you're coming in here and doing this practice, I mean, obviously like there's so many great things that are happening, but like this is a pretty huge one. We're all taking some time every day to really focus on it. But of course, then when that becomes more second nature, you're going to do it more. What he says as well, and this is one of the findings that he states at the end of the book, the perfect breath is this. Breathe in for 5.5 seconds. Breathe out for 5.5 seconds. That's 5.5 breaths a minute for a total of 5.5 liters of air. Now, what's really awesome about that for us is that if you're doing your 5 count, right, and keeping that evenness in your transitions, you are breathing for about 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out.
And that's just one? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I know in meditation or Asana, I know that I have about 30 breaths in 5 minutes. So I'm doing pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I read this, I was like, wait a minute. I mean, because people often, I've been in many Ashtanga situations where the topic of discussion is why do we breathe for 5 breaths? You know? And, yeah. Then he read that, and I was like, wow, I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. 5.5, you know, I mean, it's like, awesome.
But why, like, really what we're saying is like one posture is like 27 seconds, according to that, right?
Yeah, one side of one posture, yeah.
So how does, I just want to make sure I'm not missing it, because I didn't follow you when you said like, that explains why we are 5 breaths, because that's just one breath.
It's 5, yeah, so 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. You hold that for 5 count, and you're getting about a minute. Which is what he's saying is ideal.
Down.
Oh, okay.
5 breaths.
Okay.
Not the breath per movement.
Well,
Like in transitions, but you hold everything. You hold most postures 5 breaths.
right, I get that. I'm
Which is
just not
going to
getting
be about in line with a minute for a total of 5.5 liters of air, which is what he's saying.
Well, I'll ask you later. I just don't get the
No, 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. That's 10.
Okay.
11
Okay.
times 5 is 55.
Oh.
It's almost right on a minute.
Oh, so you're saying it's kind of like we hold each posture for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Then
that was
you
the
do the
that was the
like
connection.
rest. See, but the thing is
Okay.
like a lot of times people are shortening that.
Yeah.
But so like I read this and I thought, oh wow, so
That is cool.
maybe this is like Tommy had something in mind that we just didn't know. You know, there were a lot of things he didn't say. People speculate.
I was going to tell y'all that the library has a free app, and I'm actually listening to this book online for free. Now, if you guys want like an audio book,
Oh, the breath.
yeah, it's a great audio book for like
I bet.
walking your dog or driving.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool nuggets of information in there. So yoga starts off. He goes to this in San Francisco, and he goes to this pranayama class. And that kind of stuff.
You gave away the ending though. I didn't know about that.
Okay, so then back to David Swinson. He says the main idea is to create a rhythm in the breath and ride it throughout the practice. So I just like that visual, you know, this rhythm, riding the rhythm, riding waves, surfing. This sound becomes a mantra to set the mind in focus. I like that too, right? Like that. And this is where, like Richard Freeman will talk about this mantra, so hum, or hum sa, right? And in his book, In the Mirror of Yoga, he goes into this whole thing about that mantra. But you can start to you can personalize your experience, your practice, ritualize, basically using things like that. He says we must learn to listen to the breath. It is the guide which will tell us the quality of our practice. And that I've said that often. So I'm glad that because I don't think I've said it lately, but like really, being attuned to listening to your breath, paying attention to that is a way of getting a feel for the quality of the practice. If we apply too much effort, the breath will become constricted or forced. With too little focus, the breath may be drowned out by the sound of our pelvis. Maintain awareness upon your own breath at every moment. It's just like continually hammers home this moving meditation concept. In terms of mantra, what I mean by personalize it. So, just as an example of something that happened, Richard was about to start the swim for Ironman in New York. Well, just before he left me to go and get on the ship and go out into the water. And he was like kind he was a little panicked and nervous. It's not usual for him. And I was like, when you swim, inhale, let go, exhale, let go. And that still uses that to this day. It just stuck for him. That's just an example of the kind of thing that you can bring in if it helps you. Okay, and then something that you cannot leave out when you talk about the breath in Ashtanga is bandhas. Okay, so you can't, the bandhas are an absolute key component of this, because what they do is the bandhas are like gathering places within our body that help bring awareness and steadiness into our practice. And the main source, central place of this gathering that sets our whole practice online is Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. And I don't want to go, we do whole workshops on this, and Tim Feldman will go into this some when he comes. Some of you have already done some work with Tim Feldman on this, but Mula Bandha means root block, Uddiyana Bandha means flying up block. They are integrated. They are not really separate. I've seen Richard Freeman call it Mula Uddiyana Bandha. It's like all one word. Because you're engaging up through your pelvic floor like you're trying to stop yourself from going to the bathroom. You're hugging back deep into the low belly. What that does is it helps to contain and also moves our breathing up into our chest. So when you're practicing Ashtanga, you don't breathe in the belly. I mean, breath may move down into that area. We actually want to breathe into the whole body. But the emphasis of this flow and expansion of breath is in the lungs, up here. This is from an article by Andrew Hillam that was on the Sonima website, The Perfect Way to Breathe in Ashtanga. And I liked what he says. He says, during inhalation in Ashtanga Yoga, the action of squeezing the anus, Mula Bandha, and contracting the lower abdominal muscles, Uddiyana Bandha, prevents the lower abdominal organs from moving downward. So in other words, when you don't do that and you breathe deep and you're breathing in, your diaphragm is dropping down and it's pushing your organs down, right? But when you engage the bandhas, there's some resistance to that. So it says, instead the abdominal organs, resist the downward movement of the diaphragm and cause it to cantilever out and expand laterally. This lateral expansion of the diaphragm requires movement of the lower ribs, which also expand outwardly along with a lifting of the chest. The result is very deep breathing, which efficiently accesses all parts of the lungs to be perfected. And just to kind of hammer that home, so one way to think about it is that when you're breathing, there's 3 dimensions to this breath. Central, inhaling into the front of the chest. Side, inhaling into the front and also the sides of the chest. And back. And the back is part that often gets overlooked because we don't see it at all. When you don't see something, it's easy to forget about it, like your back leg, certain postures. Right? And so there are pockets for air in our back. Breathe into this full spectrum of our chest cavity in terms of how we're moving the breath in and out. And then just to bring a little kino into the mix. I gotta do one thing. I need to share the sound. Yeah, it's 2013. Hey, Kirsten. I forgot to click share sound. So I'll bring that back. But this is fun. Kino's. Oh, pause. Let me make sure the speaker's on.
The combination of the breath with the inner work that's known as the bandhas, or what taps you in network of tissues that ties together the bottom of the pelvis, engaging the pelvic floor strongly. Draw that deeply in. Then from the lower belly, from the navel down to the pubic bone, suck in and back. This is called Uddiyana Bandha, and the work at the bottom of the pelvis is called Mula Bandha. Having these two centers firmly engaged, then begin to initiate that deep resonant breath, the vocalized breath that's based in the Ujjayi Pranayama. And as though when you're inhaling, let the breath suck down into this power center. When you're exhaling, control the breath with a strong contraction of the pelvic floor. This will allow you to coordinate the breath with that magical experience of the bandhas. So keeping those two places firmly intact. You might also like to visualize a power center inside of your pelvis. You can connect to that, help your spine be straighter and set you into a natural postural ease. So let's find that center. Strong engagement of the pelvic floor, sucking in of the low belly, letting those two connect to a strong power center. Then inhaling, saying saw on the inhale, vocalizing the breath through your throat. Drawing the breath down to your belly and exhale. Control the breath by squeezing those power centers together. Let's do one more together. Find that power center inside of your pelvis. Inhale. And squeezing that power center, control the length of exhalation. And in this way, the experience of the bandhas is synergistically linked to the experience of the breath.
All right. Let me make sure that was all of it. One more thing. I must have added this for a reason, so I'm going to pull it back up. Oh yeah. One other teacher that is important. He is Mino Mieri. He's Italian. He actually has a shala still today that is near the Colosseum in Rome. I practiced there. It's really awesome. I mean, it's ancient. And he is the one responsible for working with Tavi Toys to create a manual that outlines the first. It outlines primary series, intermediate series, advanced A, advanced B. So it's a little bit like a Bible for Ashtanga because there's information in there that is nowhere else. And he says, and I just have always found this so awesome. The span of 100 years for human beings depends on the strength of their sense organs and the number of breaths each person takes in a day. On an average, man breathes 21,600 times a day. If we allow our senses or our mind to go without restraint, or if we indulge in excess eating or sex, our lifespan will be reduced. On the other hand, with moderate living and elongated rajaka, puraka, kubaka, so that's exhalation, inhalation, and retention, we can reduce the number of our daily breaths and elongate our lives. Suppose a man is destined to live for 80 years. He breathes 21,600 times, 365 days a year, for 80 years in his lifetime. The duration of the breathing of an ordinary person is short, and so this man's 80 years is also comparatively short. If he does pranayama regularly, controls his breathing process, and if this becomes a matter of habit, the duration of his breathing will be elongated, and his lifespan will be 21,600 elongated periods times 365 times 8. That is to say, from the point of view of the ordinary man, he can live for 160 years, or 242 years, or even more, depending upon the duration he brings to his breathing process using pranayama. And I know that sounds like outlandish, but there are some really interesting examples and studies that have found these ancient, these yogis that are able to get so deeply into breath and meditation and slow the respiration down, some to the point of stopping their hearts for periods of time, things like that. So sometimes, you know, you see things like this and it's like, yeah, whatever, but there are little nuggets of potential. Maybe not 160 years. I certainly don't want it to be 160, but I'd like to have my 80 years be good ones. All right. All right. Any questions, Kirsten or Tressie?
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to like the talking about the breath and the quality of your practice. Is that like something you can use when you like to know when it's time to end your practice? Like if you really start losing your breath, is that a sign that like you're getting fatigued and you need to wrap it up?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. You
Cool.
know, there are times, especially when you're young, where you might challenge that a little bit. You know,
Okay.
push a little bit beyond your comfort zone, beyond, and get on the struggle bus for a little bit. But by the same token, for anybody of any age, this is really important stuff to start tuning into yourself and being able to discern this is not. Because it's up to you. You know, it's not up to me. And in the old school of Ashtanga, sometimes all the power would be handed to the teacher, and the teacher would just say, "No, you do it." You know, but that's not how things work anymore. You have agency. You need to take rest. You know that. That's fine. I'm not going to fight you. You know, I'm not going to discourage you.
I have a question sort of in line with what Tressie was just asking. So there's one pose that I really don't like, and it's just difficult. So I do notice that my breathing definitely changes and becomes
Yeah.
much more labored.
Yeah.
But it also means like I shouldn't stop.
Right.
So what do you do in that sense when you have those postures that, you know, you might absolutely love and your breathing is just beautiful,
Yeah.
but then you have those postures that you might not like or are more challenging, and it's harder to get that nice flow of breath. So what do you do in those situations?
First of all, it's about changing your mindset, right? Like those are opportunities. So just think of that like this is an opportunity for growth, for understanding, for like you know, resetting. So first of all, that. Secondly, let me know. Let's work on it together. We'll probably break it down. Try and find some stage of the posture where you can get to that breath. And then once you get comfortable there, we take it to the next stage. Keep in mind that in all these postures, they can be broken down into stages. Like it's not just the in point or no point. Okay? And also, your breath is probably changing before you even start the posture. So be wary of that, but be aware of that, and try and just and take a few extra breaths. Get your breath steady, then try and move into the posture with that steady.
So then it's part of the accountability of our practice then to watch for the breath being the way that it should be, and if it's not, be accountable to ourselves really.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, this is a really good. I'm glad you brought this up, Kirsten, because this is a really good point, in particular for folks that are practicing on Zoom, because I can't hear your breath. I can observe it to some extent, but I certainly can't hear it. And so it doesn't provide me as much information as the people here in the room. So therefore, there is more of an onus on you to let me know if the breath is not even, not supporting you. Okay?